session will be led by Shivangi, and I'll just pass it on to her so that she can introduce herself and then she can lead the session.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Shivangi. I'm an SD2 at Grofers India. Basically, Grofers is an e-commerce platform in the retail grocery space, right? And I passed out in 2019 with a bachelor's in computer science from PES University. Uh, I was a former GHCI scholar back in 2018, student scholar, and I've been part of multiple volunteering events, including IEEE conferences and even Code Chef. Right. Currently, I'm helping out a open source foundation formed by a couple of college kids. So yeah, feel free to connect with me if you're interested in that. So let's just get started. So today's agenda, we'll be talking about stacks. What is a stack? What are the functions that make up stack as a data structure, right? And uses of stack. There's also a short introduction to linked lists. It's just a very brief intro so that you guys can have a better understanding of queues. And in detail, it will happen in the next session. Uh, and queues as a data structure, what is it? There are different types of queues. So, and the functions that make up a queue and the uses of both stacks and queues. And that's for the agenda today. So let's talk about stacks, right? What is the stack? So essentially, you can see this book pile, right? What is happening? One by one, you're piling a book on top of each other, and that is nothing but actually a stack, right? Stack is a linear data structure. It follows a principle called as last in, first out. What that essentially means is the last element, the last item to go in is the first thing that comes up. So basically, if you see the stack of books, it's the topmost book which you will pick out, right? So another key point to note over here is the insertion and the deletion of an element occur only from one end. That is basically the top of the stack. So for you guys to visualize it a little better, there's a illustration here. So imagine a stack as an empty container, which just has one opening, right? And then you start putting stuff in the container. Now, the first thing you put in the container, over here it's one, right? Uh, and then the second thing which you put in is two. Now, what is top? Top points to the last element which was inserted into the stack. In this case, it's two, right? And the action of adding an item to adding an element to the stack is called push, and removing things from the stack is called pop, right? And if you can see that the addition or the insertion of an element and also the removal is happening from the top end, right? And that's it. So that's basically what stack is, right? Now let's move to the next slide. Now, we define stack as a data structure, right? We mentioned certain features. So there are certain functions associated with these features, right? So I'll talk about them and their time complexity. Empty essentially means is when the stack is empty. So if I go back to the previous slide, once. So if I were to go back to the previous slide, this is an empty stack, right? And what is size? Size is the number of elements inside the stack. Top, like I mentioned previously, is the last element which was inserted into the stack. And push essentially means adding an element into the stack. And pop deletes the topmost element from the stack. Now, all these operations have an O of 1 complexity. What does that mean? That means these operations can actually happen in constant time. Right? It does not depend on the size of the stack. So yeah, let's just see. All right, what are the uses of stack? Stack being a linear data structure, right? It makes it it's an easy to implement data structure. And since the operations are of one complexity, it makes sense to use these in places where, you want to reduce the execution time. So for example, for stacks, right? We use stacks in memory management in modern computers. What does that mean? Right? So essentially, your computer has an internal stack which stores items, right? Uh, you Everyone knows what a recursion function is, right? So basically, a recursion function is nothing but a function that keeps on calling itself. So let's say you're calling a recursion function. The first call of the recursion function is stored into the stack, right? And after the next call, it's again stored in the tags stack. It goes on until you hit the base case, right? Let's say for a factorial function, if it's 1 or 2, right? You hit the base case, then you start popping things from the stack and releasing the memory. And that is how computers use stacks to manage string reversal. Uh, if I have to talk about string reversal, if you saw in the illustration over here, right? If the string is 1 to 3, essentially when I'm popping things out, it's going to become 3 to 1, right? So I can easily reverse a string using a stack. Now, we all use undo, redo operations in a lot of editors or even a Word document or anything, right? So how are these features managed? These features are also managed using stack. So basically you do a push and a pop. Even your git stash function essentially is doing this. Just pushing stuff to a stack and then you can pop things out from it. And even the forward and backward operation in your web browsers, like navigating through the history, is also done via a stack. So now let's talk about linked lists. We'll be going over it in detail in the next session. So I'm just going to briefly introduce what linked list as a data structure is. Okay. So linked list is a linear data structure, right? The main feature or the key feature about the linked list is it allows you to store elements in a non-contiguous fashion, right? Let's say you have an array of size 3, okay? So all the memory locations where the elements for that array are stored, or in the Python universe, the list, right, are stored, are continuous in nature. So you can directly access them using the index, right? 0, 1, or 2. So, but in linked list, what we do is you don't have to store all these 3 elements in contiguous memory locations. So, so how do linked lists look like, right? If you see this train, there's this one head, okay, and then there are a couple of bogies following around, right? So this is essentially how a linked list would look like. And the links or the chains between the two cards are the point. You can call them pointer because it's connecting the first and the second or the next link to the other, right? How do linked lists look like as a data structure? So essentially you have the head, like the driver in the video, and the data is probably the person sitting there, right? And next essentially is the link, which is connecting the first, this element to the other element, right? Now, another thing I mentioned when I was talking about lists or arrays, right? You could directly access an element located at an index. That is not possible in case of a linked list, right? So the accessing an element directly at an index is called a random access, right? Whereas linked list, you will have to do something called as a sequential access. What that essentially means is, let's say I have to access the if I have to access the second element, right? What will happen? I have to start at the head and then keep traversing till I reach the second element. And that's how I'll be able to access the second element. And this bundle of data and next, right, essentially is called a node. And head is the pointer or the reference which points to the beginning of the linked list. So let's just move on to the next slide. So I've spoken about linked lists. Now let's talk about queues, right? What is a queue? Again, queue is a linear data structure. How is it different from stacks? Queue is different from stacks because unlike stacks, it follows the rule called FIFO, which says first in, first out. Basically, the first thing which goes in is the first thing to come out, right? Now, to help you understand that better, there's this representation, right? So if I had to visualize a queue in the real world scenario, right? You can take this example. There's a billing counter, right? You have a bunch of things you would want to check out, right? So this lady in the front with a stack of books, this is called the front of the queue, right? She was the first person here. So logically, she is the first person who's probably checking out her cart, right? And this person is the one who joined the queue late. So he'll be the last person to check out in an ideal world where no one cuts in, right? And so so this is the front and this is the rear. So if I had to represent a queue, I would represent it as a pipe, which has both the ends open, right? In queue, what essentially happens, you can add the addition of the elements would happen from the back, right? And that operation is going to called enqueue, and the deletion will happen from the front of the queue, right? And that's called dequeue. And here you can see, unlike stack again, the insertion and deletion are happening at two different ends. And that's the key feature of a queue. Let's go to the next slide. So there are 4 types of queues, basically. A simple queue is nothing but what you saw here. This is a simple queue. Then there's something called as a circular queue, priority queue, and double-ended queue or a doubly ended queue. So simple queue is, again, what I showed you earlier. So I'll just go to the next part of it. Now, what is a circular queue? Circular queue is a queue where the last element also points to the first element. Basically, the front, the pointer of the rear element is pointing to the front element. And what is the benefit of this kind of a queue as opposed to a simple queue? It allows you to do a better memory utilization, right? Since if in case if last position is full and the first position is empty, you can directly insert an element into the first position rather than having to insert that element at the rear, right? And that gives you better memory utilization. Now let's talk about priority queue. Now, priority queue is a very special kind of queue, and it is one of the most popular and widely used queue. Why is that so? Like its name suggests, there is something called as a priority, right? So essentially, each element is associated with a priority. Now, when all the queues you saw so far, the order in which the elements were removed was the FIFO rule, right? The first person to come in is the first person to go out, right? But unlike the other 2 queues, over here, the logic is slightly different. So here the elements are served according to their priority. So I'll explain that in a little more detail in the next slide. So another thing is, okay, let's just go there. It'll be better for everyone to visualize. So this is how a priority queue would look like, right? You can see that 1, 2, 3 is the priority of the elements. And in priority 1, you just have one element. And in priority 2, you have 3 elements. And in priority 3, you have 2 elements. Now, what am I trying to say here, right? If an element is supposed to be served according to priority, that essentially means all the elements in the first, which have a priority 1, will be the first to leave the queue, right? But what do I do in case of 2? 2 has more than 1 element, right? That means two or more things have the same priority. In that case, what essentially happens is you go in the order in which it's inserted in the queue, right? So let's say the first cell, so it's, if I have to remove items from the queue, it's going to be this way. You would start at 1, and then you would move from left to right, and then you would go down, which is the second priority. And then again, you would move from left to right in removal. And so on, the process will continue. Now, the insertion also occurs on the basis of, the insertion occurs based on the arrival of the values, basically first come, first serve. And the removal happens based on the priority of the elements. So yeah, that's a priority queue. Now let's talk about DQ, or doubly ended queue or double-ended queue. Here, the special feature over here is you can insert and delete from either ends of the pipe, right? You can remove elements from the front. You can add elements from the front. You can remove elements from the back. You can add elements from the back. Unlike a simple queue where you can add things only at the back and remove things only from the front, right? And even over here, it does not exactly follow the first in, first out rule, because you can add at either end of the queue. Yeah. So the basic functions associated with a queue are enqueue, which means adding an element to the queue. Dequeue is removing an element from the queue. Front, which gives you the front of the queue. Essentially, in a simple queue, that's where the removal is going to happen from. And where points to the last element of the queue, where your insertion happens in a simple queue. And these time complexities are for the simple FIFO queue or even the circular queue. And what are the uses of a queue? So queues are used where you want to do where you want to schedule things, right? Where there's a single resource which needs to be distributed, or you need to decide who should get the resource first, right? So they kind of use queues to handle this. So examples would be using a shared printer in your office. If you want to schedule some tasks, your CPU scheduling, and even disk scheduling. Now, another use of the queue is when you want to do a data transfer in an async fashion. Basically, that means the incoming rate of the data and the outgoing rate of the data, they are not the same, right? You don't send things as soon as they come. So a good example would be your input output buffers. So let's say you're typing something, right? And how do those words appear on your computer screen? So basically all the alphabets you type in or everything you type in is stored in a queue, and then it's flushed out from the queue when you press enter or you pop it out, right? Another real world example could be, apart from the cash counter example, is when you're calling an helpline number or when you're calling a call center, right? They put you on queues, they say waiting time is this and stuff like that. And again, another good example here where we use queues is handling interrupts, right? Interrupts are anything which disrupts the normal flow of the operation of any system, right? And essentially, when you have to handle more than one interrupt, you put them on a queue, and based on the priority, you start handling these things. Or there another strategy is usually handling it in a first come first serve manner. So, yeah. Are there any questions? Because I'm kind of done with the theory part. If there are no questions, I would like to move to the.
I think there are two
Hmm.
questions. But
Sure.
if you look at the Q&A chat, I'm not able to open that up.
One second.
Okay, so we have a couple questions in the Q&A. So the first question is, can you please give an example of a double-ended queue in the real world?
Double-ended queue in a real world, like I said, right? Let's just go. Just give me 1 minute. Just help this out. So, like I said, visualize it as a pipe, right? You have a pipe which is open-ended in both, which has 2 open ends, and you can add things and remove things from either side, right? If I had to do that. Whereas if you were doing, if you were using a stack, it's essentially like a box or a jar. You're putting things in a jar. So it has only like one opening. So does that clarify things? Or do you want me to give you an example?
Okay, next question. Does the priority queue have something to hold priority value?
Yes. So a priority queue will essentially be like, it won't just store the data, it will also store the priority of the data as the node, right?
Could you explain a little bit more about time complexity?
Okay. So do you want me to explain what time complexity is, or do you want me to explain why the time complexity is 1 in this case?
Both. There are two questions. Like one is explain time complexity, and the other one is what does time complexity of O1 for NQ mean?
Okay, cool. I'll do that. Give me a minute. So essentially, right, let's just stay here. What is time complexity? Time complexity is a way which we can describe how complex a problem is, right? Usually this complexity is defined by the number of operations which happen in a function or in an algorithm. And if this number is dependent on the number of items in the number of elements, let's say, for example, in list, right? If I have to print the list, how you will be running a for loop from from 0 to the length of the list, right? And that means I'm doing the printing operation like n times, where n is your length of the list. And over there, I would say that the time complexity is O of n, because no matter what happens, I have to run that for loop for n iterations, right? And big O essentially means it's the worst case time complexity. This is like a very high O level overview kind of thing, since time complexity in itself is a very big topic. So I hope that clarifies at least something. And then I'll explain why it's 1 for the queue, right? Now see, if I had to insert an element in an array towards the end of the array, right? what would I have to do? I would probably do a for loop till I find the end of the array. Or array is a bad example. Let's just go to linked list, right, for that. So if I had to, so imagine this, a queue can also be represented as a linked list, right? So essentially, this is the front of the queue, and this will become the rear of the queue. And you have data, and this is next, right? It points to the next node. Now, if I had to insert things in a linked list, right? Linked list just stores the head pointer. If I had to insert linked list, if I had to insert an item in this towards the end, what I would have to do is I would have to go through all the nodes before the ending node where your null pointer points, where your next pointer points to null, right? That means if the length is 3, I would have to essentially go through 3 iterations till I find this empty node and then add a new node. Whereas in queue, what essentially happens is you already know where your rear points, right? You already know where this is. So you would just want to add the element directly over here. So can you see the difference? Does that clarify things a little bit? I hope. I can't exactly see the Q&A section. So was that explanation fine?
Yeah, we can move on. There's another question. So, can you give an example of an application of a double-ended queue?
Yeah. So double-ended queues can also be used in one of the scheduling examples I gave you, right? Let's say if I don't want to remove elements just from the front or the end based on something, I have my own logic and I want to be able to remove things from the from any thread. In that case, you'd probably use a double-ended queue, or you can also one side. Yeah. So that's one example I can give you. And if you guys want more examples, I'll do one thing. I'll attach some references in the slides so that you can go through it. Is that fine?
Yep, that'll be great.
Cool. Can someone keep a copy of these questions? I'll just attach the FAQ sections answers also in the PPTs. Cool. So shall I start with the coding part of it? Like, do let me see. Know if you guys can still see my screen.
Yep, can see.
Let's start. So today we'll be discussing how to implement stacks using stacks and queues using lists. Lists and arrays have been discussed previously. So if you guys have any questions or doubts, do feel free to ask. And we'll be discussing 3 lead code problems, 2 from stacks and 1 from queue. And yeah, let's get started. So I think Stephanie has shared the collab link with all of you. Just do one thing, open up the collab link and just make a copy of it in your drive, right? And it'll directly open the copy. Yeah, and you can probably use this copy to follow along the code long session. Yep, that's good. If everyone's ready, just let me, can everyone just let me know on the chat if you guys have done cloning, and then I'll start. Jasmine, can you see the Q&A section? There's another question, but I can't really see the question.
Okay, can you show them one more time how to copy?
Cool, okay. So you don't have to do anything. Just click on File and do Save a Copy in Drive. And it'll automatically open up a new copy in a new tab. So just do that. So is everyone good to go? Cool. Okay. So let's start then. Right. So everyone knows how to create a list, right? So the first task at hand here is we're going to be using list to create a stack. So just create a new variable called stack and declare it as an empty list. Now, the next task which you have is to append items or elements into the list, right? Or in this case, it's a stack. So you don't have to do anything, but you just have to do stack dot append, right? And just type whatever you want to append to the stack, right? So I'll be pushing one element now, and you can just add another element. So now let's just see what's there in the stack, right? Okay, so 7 got inserted twice. I'll do one thing. I'll just rerun this. Cool. So now the stack has 2 elements, and those are 10 and 7, right? So 10 was the first element to be inserted. 7 was the second element, or the last element in this case, right? Now, what is the top element of the stack? So essentially, top element of the stack is going to be the last element which was inserted, right? So how do you know which is the last element which is inserted? Since we are using lists to implement stacks here, it's pretty easy. So you can just do this. And you can just use list indexing -1, which so if you guys know how lists work, you know the first element, the indexing starts from 0 and it goes till n-1 if the size of the list is n, right? And if I had to access things in reverse, I access the last element, which is the n-nth index element, using -1. So the top element right now is 7. Now, how do we remove elements or pop elements from the stack? And which element do you think is going to be popped out? So can you guys type in your answers in the chat? So cool. So everyone's saying 7, if I'm right. So let's see what happens over here, right? And yeah. So this is the popped element, okay? And what do you think the stack looks like now? If I had to print. So there's just one element. Now let's say if I had to run this again, what do you think is going to happen? right? So 10 is removed. But what happens if I run this again? What do you guys think is going to happen? Is it going to run? What's going to happen? Would you type in your answers on the chat? Okay. What kind of an error do you think? If you think it's an error, what kind of error do you think will happen? Okay. It is saying it's going to be an empty stack. Karen saying it's index error. Okay, cool. So you guys are kind of right. So if I run this again, I'm going to get an index error, which is essentially also meaning that my stack is empty. And this condition is called stack underflow, right? And then what do you think is stack overflow? I just explained what an empty stack is called, right? It's called an underflow. So what do you guys think is a stack overflow? Could you guys type in the chat? Cool. Okay. So when an stack is full, right? In this case, since you're using a list implementation, essentially, we haven't put a constraint on the size of the stack over here, right? But usually the implementations, even in your computer memory, the heaps and stack actually have a limit or a maximum heap size or a maximum stack size beyond which you cannot go. And if you try adding an extra element, let's say if my stack size was 2, right? If I added 2 elements and when I tried to add the third element, I'm supposed to get an error which says either the stack is full or you can say stack overflow, and that's it. So now let's just go.
One question for you before you move on. So
Sure.
someone asked, why is it stack of -1? What does that mean?
Okay, so I think they missed out on the part where I was explaining list indexing. So when you have lists in Python, what essentially happens, like every other programming language, you know, the index usually starts for the first element at 0. Let me just walk you through a quick example if that's what I think that would be better. So let's say you have a list, say L, okay, and this is an empty list, and I add like say some elements here, let's say 3 and 4, or maybe 5, right? So how do I access each of these elements? Now, if I had to access these elements, now if I had to access 3, what do you think I would access it? You know what an index is, right? So how do you think I can access 3? Can you type in chat? Anyone? How do you 0, right? And if I had to access 4, I'll just move one step to the right. So that means the in 0th index plus 1, and that's going to be 1. Okay. And in case of 2, in case of 5, if I had to access it, I'll again move one step to the right, incrementing the index by 1. So that means 2. Right. And as you can see, the size of this list is 3. So the indexes range from 0 to 3, 0 to 2, right? For a list of length 3. Now, if I had to access things in reverse, right? I cannot start using 3 because hey, if the length of the list was 4, that means the index, the positive index could go till 3, right? So what do I do? So look, try and think of it like a number line. So your forward order starts at 0 and you had 1, 2, you had 0, 1, and 2. Now, if I had to start in the reverse direction, and that's why the negative indexing starts, right? So the last element essentially becomes -1 on the number line, and the second last would become -2 in this case, and the first element here is, in this case, is going to become -3. So let's just try it out, right? What's happening? So here it was minus, so you got 5, right? Now if I move towards the left in the number line, since negative numbers move towards the left, right? And it'll become 4. And similarly, if I had to access the first element, it's going to become 3. So does that answer everyone's queries regarding the indexing? Any further questions?
Yep. There's one more. How much memory is allocated when we create the list as a stack?
See, this is more of a dynamic implementation, right? The memory allocation will happen based on the data type. Let's say, standard C++ format or whatever, it will probably be like 4 bytes. Right? And as you keep adding things to it, the size is going to increase by the number of elements. So if there are 3 and it occupies 4 bytes each, it's going to become 12 bytes. Yeah, does that answer questions?
Okay.
Cool. So if you guys don't have any further questions, let's just get to the interview questions section. What's it? Is everyone ready for that? Do you think you could implement a stack and do things? Cool. So we've discussed how the major operations you will be needing, right? Pointing to the top, removing and adding things to the stack, right? And the if and else or your try catch blocks which you have to put and where you would want to put them, the stack underflow and the stack overflow conditions. Okay. So now let's start with the next problem statement. This is called the valid parenthesis problem. Given a string containing just the characters, the opening and closing brackets of 3 different types, the round brackets, the curly braces, and the square brackets over here, right? You got to determine if the input string which is given is valid or not. And how do you check this validity, right? You need to check if you have the opening and closing brackets of the same type. And these brackets must be closed in the correct order, right? Now, when I give you a problem like this, what is the first solution that comes to your head? Right? Can anyone take a shot at it? If you want to do it, how do you think you can do this? Like, what would be the brute force kind of an approach here? Okay. Valencia says string reversal. Valencia, how do you think string reversal is going to do the trick? Curious. Okay. Count the parentheses. Lata says count the parents. And Sharmeen says push the open brackets into a stack, right? So yes, the first implementation which probably comes to everyone's mind is probably counting things, right? If I count the number of opening and closing brackets, and if they're the same, I should probably return a true, right? And let's just run through the sample scenarios and understand what's going to happen. So in the first case, if I go with the approach of just counting the number of brackets and of which type they are. So there's one opening and closing bracket of the same type, right? So I probably return a true. And even here, the count is the same, right? You have opening and closing brackets for round, squares, and curly flower brackets, right? And I'll again return a true. In this case, I'll probably return a false, right? Because I don't have the equal number of opening and closing brackets of the same type, right? So that logic of counting is still working, right? And let's go to the fourth example. Over here, this is where this is the case where that counting logic is probably gonna break, right? See here, So you have an opening round braces, then you have a square bracket, and then you have a closing round braces, and then you have another closing square bracket, right? But if I just go by the count of round brackets and square brackets, opening and closing one, they're the same, right? I should probably return a true, but the order in which they are closing is incorrect. So what do you mean by order, right? So what do you think, if I had to convert this expression into a valid expression, how would it look like, right? Okay, 86, cool. So Geeti and Maria have written that you would have an opening round, you have a closing round, and then you have an opening square, and you have a closing square, and that's correct, right? The thing is, the order in which, so if you have the first bracket which appears in the string is a round bracket, so then it should be the first bracket that gets closed. If the first bracket to appear is probably a square bracket, then it should be the first one to be closed. And that is how you figure out, hey, my solution of just counting the brackets is not enough. I've got to do something else, right? And what is that something else? In this case, we are going to go with using stacks, and I'll walk you through how that's going to happen. Right. So the correct answer is the opening rounds and square brackets. So the correct answer would be cool. If there aren't any other questions, should I move on to the solution part of it? Or does anyone have any queries so far? Cool. So should I move to the next part? Okay, there are some constraints given here. You can say that, so you in a normal real world kind of a problem, right? You would probably want to do checks for the types of brackets which are appearing in the string. But here you can assume in case in the scope of this problem that you will get only these brackets or only these characters are going to appear in your string. So you don't have to solve for white spaces or unnecessary characters and stuff like that. And also they've mentioned over here, the string length cannot exceed 104 in length. Okay. So let's just hope. Yeah, I'll walk you through the pseudocode and then we'll move to the code. Right. For your reference, there is a sort of a pseudocode written there. So how are we going to do this? Right. Cool. Okay. Now, let's say I have a string, right? And this is how probably, let's just go with a basic example. Okay. And this is a simple string. Okay. And what do I do next with this, right? How do I approach or how do I come up with a solution in this case? So you saw that the counting of brackets did not work, right? Now, what do I do? Now, if I have to use a stack, how would I use the stack, right? So what you would do, I would start iterating over this string, right? And if it's an opening bracket, right? What you would do is you would probably, let's say you have a stack. And you would just probably add that to the stack. So this is my stack. And I'll just say stack dot append. This is when your I is probably equal to 0. So I is equal to 0. That means I'm running a for loop over the I'm running a for loop over S, right? And S of I is, what do you think S of I is? S of I is probably, right? That's S of I. So if I declare the stack, and now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to add something into the stack, right? Which is going to be S of I. One time. I'm just going to declare. So I'm going to append S of I. So, cool. So let's just see how the stack looks like, okay? So the stack has only one element, which is the opening braces, right? And what is the next step? Now you would go to the next index, okay, which is I equal to 1. And what you would do is you would check if it is an opening. Over here, I did a check that if this was this, right, I would add it to the stack. So essentially, I'll just move this part of that logic here. So I'm going to say if specify equals to this. I'm going to move this. Right. And as you can see, the stack has the opening braces. So the next thing you do is you would check if your stack is having the closing braces. Right. So what do you do if there is a closing brace? In case of a closing brace, what you would do is you would, if it's not an opening bracket, it means it has to be a closing bracket of any kind, right? Which is true. In this case, it has to be this, right? And then I'm going to check if the stack is empty. So if I have to put it here, I'll check if stack, if len of stack equals to 0. And then what do I do? If the len of stack is 0, you're just going to print false. Okay. When do you think it's going to become false, right? I'll give you an example here. Let's say I'll do one thing. When this condition is going to become false, I'll just take another variable, say S1, just for the sake of simplicity. So you understand why this condition is important. And I'm going to be like, if S of 1 is this, right? And if your stack is empty. So essentially over here, if my string was just an closing bracket, right? If this was the string, input string, which I had given, basically the push operation into the stack is happening only if you encounter an opening bracket. So essentially, if I go to the next, let's say, this was the next element or whatever you had, right? If I move to the second index or I equals to 1 iteration, you would still just have closing brackets. So that essentially that means my stack is empty, right? Because it never found an opening bracket, so it never inserted anything into the stack. And in that case, it's not a valid string, right? Because the opening brackets was not followed by a closing brackets. It was just closing brackets. Is this clear so far? Cool. If it's clear, I'll just move to the next part. And now what do you do? So, okay, this is one condition, right? And if that happens, you know what to do. It's not a valid string anymore. And next you do is you would pop the topmost element of the stack, right? So if I had to do popped element, element, I'll just do stack dot pop, right? And this is an else condition. Okay. And here I'm saying if the stack is empty, you're returning false in terms of a function. So that means there's an else here. And if the top of the top element of the stack, that's this, right? And you want to store it as current, or here I've said popped element, for it's easier for you to understand. And you would want to compare that. You want to check if pop element is equal to and opening bracket and your S of I is equal to a closing brackets. Right? And if that's the case, you print. So basically you're checking if this condition is there. Yes, it's supposed to be indented because it's inside an outer if. In answer to another question. Cool. So this is the general logic, right? So if I had to, then I add a bunch of more ifs, right? Based on the bracket type. You check if the current bracket is an opening bracket of type X. And if you check the character which you're iterating over, which is S of I, is the closing bracket of the same type. If not, you would return a false, right? This here is return. Then okay. So after all this, how do I know if my string is still valid or not? So what could essentially happen, right? If I'm going over multiple cases, there might be trues in some case. So in case of true, I'm not exactly exiting things. In case of false, I'm exiting the function. I'm just returning false and leaving the function. But in case of true, I'm just continuing the iteration over the string, right? To check if every pair of opening and closing brackets is in the correct format or not. If the opening and closing brackets for all these things are in the correct format or not. Now, if my stack, after going through all the characters in the string, if my stack is empty, I'm going to return true. Otherwise, I'm going to return a false, right? And what you do when you find that, hey, the popped element and these are same, since you've anyways popped an element, it's already removing it from the stack, right? So as and when you keep encountering opening brackets, they're going to remove, as and when you encounter closing brackets, they're going to remove the opening brackets from the stack. And let's say they did not find a matching pair. In that case, that one set of opening bracket would still be inside the stack, right? And if that happens, that means your string is not valid. Cool. Any questions, or can we get started by implementing this function?
There's one question. Why is the code says that you have the statement after else, right? Can you go back to your pseudocode? There is something in the if, yeah. So the if popped equal to open, and then the question is why is there a and s of I of close bracket there? Since there is already an if statement in the first line.
Okay. This one, are we talking about fourth point?
Yeah, I mean, in your code, that's the fourth if statement.
Okay. So I'm saying this, if it's not an opening bracket, right? I'm going to push things, and if it's otherwise, I'm going to do certain different kind of operations. That is why there is an this is an if else block actually. And I wanted to differentiate where we are pushing things to the stack and where we wanted to remove things from the stack.
Okay, sorry if I was not clear. So you see the if after your else, there's an F, right?
Yeah.
The code that you had before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it says if popped element equal to open bracket and s of I equal to close bracket. So the question is, why is that and s of I
Oh yeah.
close bracket is necessary? Because you have that already in the if statement. I think that is what the question meant.
Right. Yeah. So it's supposed to be an else block. It's fine. You can keep it as an else block or you can keep it as an else block. It's so usually when you try to implement things in production, right? You'd probably want to constrain things, and so it's better to have an else if block. Otherwise, if you have an anomaly expression over here, they've told you like it's guaranteed that you will not have some additional characters. But when you're doing things in production or if you're writing it in some system, you would probably want to still keep a safe check that, hey, even if I'm putting an else block, let me put an if condition and see if the input is as per my expectation or not. So it's how you want to validate things, right? So that's your strategy. So it's a force of habit for me. So that's why it was there. So I hope that clarifies things for everyone. So shall we get started with the implementation? So first things first, you have to declare a variable called stack, right? And you would probably want to uh, start a for loop. Okay. You want to start a for loop, say for every character in the string s, right? If the character is in uh, a list of opening brackets, right? You have to push things into the stack. So does anyone want to give a shot as to how you'll push things into the stack over here? So what would you want to append to the stack, right? I would want to append the opening brackets into the stack. Yeah. Now the next thing is, this is the else condition, right? Over here, you can do an elif, or you can just keep it as an else. Up to you. Here, since they already know that you already know the input string is not going to have any anomalous characters, so let's just go with an else for the sake of simplicity. Now, what you want to do is you want to check if the stack is empty or not. Okay. So how do I check if my stack is empty? So I'm just going to do if stack. Since stack is a list, I'm just going to do len, right? And if this length of the stack is 0, I'm going to just return false. we did this over here, right? So if the length of the stack is 0, you're going to return false, right? What's the next step? So the next step is you want to check if the character is an closing braces of a certain type, right? So now how do you do that? So I'm going to declare a variable, say current, right? And let's call it current character for the readability of the code. And I'm just going to say stack, right? So what do you think is going to be there in the current character? So this is your sample string. I'm just going to post it on chat so you guys have a reference, right? What do you think is going to be the current character just for the first iteration? Does anyone want to give this a shot? What do you think is going to be the output of this statement here? Okay, cool. So the output is going to be the opening brackets, right? And in this particular example, it's going to be the opening round bracket. Cool. So everyone's understood that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the current character is an opening bracket and the character which I'm currently on, or the iterating character, that's C, is a closing bracket. Okay. I'm just going to do this. And next I would want to check it. So here what you're doing is you're saying I'm doing a not condition. So if it's not a closing brackets of the same type, I can just exit this function over here, right? Because if the order is not maintained even for one pair of brackets, I can just exit and say it's an invalid string, right? Now, what do you think I should do about the other strings? Can someone write a snippet for that? So this is done only for the round brackets, right? Why don't you guys try writing the snippets for maybe the curly braces or the square brackets? How would it look like? Anyone want to give it a shot? Is everyone following through or am I going too fast? Okay. Do you guys want me to go to the next part of the code, or are there any questions, or you guys are facing any issues in following whatever I've written so far?
There's one question in the chat. Could you just scroll up a little bit? Shubham, please.
Okay.
They have a question about the stack of y is equal to closing bracket.
Okay. Oh yeah. So essentially, this was so Shamini, the over here, right? I'm just trying to emulate this else scenario, right? You're right. If it's in closing braces here, it does not need to be here. It's just an else condition just to emulate what I'm doing in the pseudocode. If you see here, I have an if which handles the opening cases, and then I'll probably have an if which handles all these closing brackets, right? So essentially, it could have just been if S of I is in a list of something. It was just for the sake of simplicity. I hope that clarifies the doubt. Cool. Okay. So yeah, everyone's pretty much right about how to do this. So sorry, I'm a little lazy. I'm not typing everything again. So I'm just going to go with the usual coding practice of copy pasting. So yeah. Cool. So far, so good, right? Would you need to pop a second value to get C to check the closing brackets? No, Megan. So what we are doing is, as soon as, think about it this way. So if the index which you're at, right, which is S of I, is a closing bracket, you would essentially pop the opening bracket or the topmost element in the stack, right? So whenever you encounter any sort of closing brackets, you're popping things in the stack. So at any given point of time, your stack will only store opening brackets and not closing brackets, because I'm never pushing them into the stack. Yeah. Yeah, ET, we'll get to it when it will return true, right? Like I mentioned, it will return true if only if all the pairs of brackets in this string are balanced or are valid, right? So I would ideally do it at outside the for loop. So we'll get to that eventually, right? So now this for loop is done. So every time I get a closing bracket, I'm going to pop things from the stack, right? And then I'm going to check if it's in correct order or not. And every time I find an opening bracket, I'm going to push things into the stack. Is everyone clear with that so far? So now comes the main magic, which is going to tell you if the string is valid or invalid, right? So here again, you're going to check if the stack is empty. So if just copy this condition, people. There's no other way to do this. If length of stack is equal to 0, then you want to return a true. And else you'll return a false. Cool. Is this clear enough? Any questions so far? So let's just see if it works, okay? And what do you think the output is going to be for this string? For this example here, what's the output going to look like? Cool. All right. So let's just see. Right. So everyone's right. The answer is invalid string. So yeah, we're done with this. Let's just take one valid string in case anyone has something. So it's a valid string. So far, so good. Any questions, anyone? Any doubts?
So there's a question. Could you also use if not stack to check for a filled stack?
Yeah, you can use that. I had used it in my original solution, but the one which I'll share it with you guys if you want. But I'm not using, I didn't use it over here because some people might not understand that. And that's why I did not use it. You can definitely use if not stack. How would things look like if I had to do that? This condition would look slightly different, right? I'll just take one example here. So if stack, right? So when you say if not stacked, it checks if it's empty or not. So it's going to return true. Else you would want to return false, right? Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Why use equal to example equal to 0? I mean, I think the question is why is there's a double equal to here?
Okay. This is just a way of me where. So you're using double equal to because you want to evaluate this Boolean expression kind of thing. You're checking the equality of this, checking the equality of this length and this number over here, right? Another way you can do it is using this. So if I just put a single equal to, it's an assignment statement rather than a comparison operator. So yeah, that's why the double equal to. Does that answer the question? Okay, Nadia said, can we try this? Sure, we can. Right. So Nadia, what do you think will be the answer or should be the answer? Oh, it's a valid check. Cool. Any other questions?
Can you walk through can you walk through running the test case step by step?
Okay. So which test case do you want me to run? Through this one?
Yeah, or we can just take a small example because.
So yeah. So let me just go with the basic example which I was going over here, right? So if this is a string, how is this going to work? Simple. Cool. It's going to be valid. So essentially, so then my stack is empty, right? And over here, S is a list, S is a string. That means I can access. So this is how S looks like. Okay? S is this string. And if I had to walk through this, so the first character C is going to be the opening round braces. Right. So since it is in this list, right? It's an opening bracket and it's in this list. I'm going to append it to the stack. So now my stack will have this opening round. Now this iteration is kind of done, right? The for loop is done. Now the second iteration, this is the character, the closing round. So that does not fall in this list. So it's going to go to the else block, right? It's going to check if the length of the stack is 0. It's not, because it has this opening round bracket. And it's going to pop the current character. It's going to pop the stack. So since the stack, the last element inside that went in the stack was the opening round brackets, so it's going to pop that out. Now I'm going to check if the current bracket is the current character is the popped character is an opening round bracket. And I'm going to check if it is not a closing round bracket, right? So this condition is false. So I'll never go to this return statement. And this condition also will evaluate to false because it's an opening round bracket and not an opening flower bracket or square bracket, right? And so that's it. So your for loop is kind of done after this. Then I'm checking if my stack is empty or not. So when I pop that round bracket from the stack, my stack essentially became empty. Since my stack is empty, I'm going to return true. So does that answer the question, or would you want me to explain anything else?
I think it's good. We can move forward.
Cool. We can move forward. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So the next question we are doing is decoded string. Actually, just give me 1 minute. I'll represent my screen again. Is that fine? Just give me a minute. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Sorry about that. I'll need to say that. Is my screen visible to everyone? Yeah. So let me just start with the next problem statement. So this is again a stack problem statement, right? It's slightly complicated. So I'm just gonna go through it slowly. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Okay. So this is called the decode string problem statement. Okay. And yeah. So over here, you're going to be given an encoded string, and what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to return a decoded version of that string. Okay. And how would you do that? So let's say this is the encoding rule, right? There's an integer k. K is in positive integer, and then you have a pair of opening and closing square brackets. Within these square brackets, you're going to be given a string, right? The encoding rule says that whatever string is inside the square brackets needs to be repeated k times, exactly k times. Okay. One assumption we are making here is, again, the input's always going to be of a valid type, right? You won't have any unwanted characters. The square brackets are balanced and stuff like that. So you don't actually have to handle those cases. So now let's just go through the example, right? So it will be much more easier to understand what's exactly happening here. So let's say there is 3A. Okay, let's just do one thing. I'll just let's say this is an example string. So let's just say S2, S1, whatever. Okay. This is an example string. And let me just take a simpler example, actually. Let's just take this case. Okay. So what the encoding rule says is K, I'll just put the encoding rule here. encoding rule says K and say string is actually equal to string being repeated K times. So let's just here. Okay. So this is what the encoding rule essentially means. So this will repeat till you have like K. So it's going to repeat like K times. Okay. Now in this example, this is how it's going to look like. You're saying the decoded expression is going to look like A, right? This is the encoding string. And this is how the decoded string will look like. Yeah. So this is one example, right? And I will not go through the pseudocode, and I'll tell you why. It is too wordy. I mean, it's there as a guideline. I would rather walk you through one of the examples on the internet, which is a much more a visual representation. So it's going to help you understand things a little better, right? So if you guys can see my screen, let me know. Cool. Yeah. Is it visible to everyone? Cool. Okay. So this is the expression which they're taking over here. Okay. I will add this to the notebook, okay, or the slides if you guys want later. So essentially how we would want to solve this problem, right? We would want to maintain two different kinds of stacks. One is going to be an integer stack and the other is going to be a string stack, right? The integer stack is going to contain all the numbers or the multipliers, which is K. And the character stack is actually going to store the opening and closing square brackets, as well as the expression between them, right? So far, so good. Oh, any questions? Cool. Okay. So for the first iteration, you have 3, and you, since it's an integer, you are going to push it into the integer stack, right? So since the input is a string, you would essentially first want to convert the convert the integer string into an integer using maybe an ASCII conversion or however you're comfortable, right? Now, what is the next step? In the next iteration, what's going to happen is it's going to encounter a opening square brackets. So it's not an integer, so I'm going to add it to the character stack, right? And the next thing you would want to do is, again, you're going to go over to the next index, right? You're going to move right. And that's B. You encounter a B. It's a character. Again, I'm going to put it in the character stack, right? Is this fine so far? Should I go next to the next part? If steps 1 to 3 are clear, then I can go to the next steps. Cool. Okay. Now, the next thing which I encounter over here is 2. 2 is a number. It goes into the integer stack, right? And then you move right again, and you find an opening square bracket. You push it into the character stack. Then you encounter C, which goes into the character stack again, or the string stack, whatever you call it. Here, it's again a character, so it goes in character stack. You find a closing square bracket, it needs to go into the character stack. But rather than actually pushing it into the character stack, what you would do is you would want to start popping elements until you find an opening square bracket, right? And you do two things here. You would start popping until I find the opening square bracket. Okay. And you would also want to pop the integer multiplier for this pair, right? So essentially, you have this closing square brackets. I'm going to pop till I find an opening bracket, and then I'm going to pop this number 2 from the integer stack. And that is going to give you an expression, right? So integer stack, the popped element is 2. Character stack, the popped element is A and C, right? It's since you're popping it, it's going to be in the reverse direction. So you're going to have to do a reversal kind of a thing if you want to maintain things. Uh, so far, so good. Did everyone understand this, or are there any questions? After A, does it push an opening? If an opening square bracket was followed, if A was followed by an opening square bracket, yes, it would have pushed it into the stack. But usually in stacks, whenever you encounter the closing brackets, right, you would want to pop and find where things started. And that's the way it usually works, right? Is step 6 clear to everyone why it is AC and not CA? Okay. So now I'm going to go to the 7th step, right? Now, what you would want to do is this AC needs to be converted into CA. And since the count which were in the integer stack was 2, I'm going to repeat CA twice. That's going to be CA. And then I'm going to push it back into the stack, right? So I push CA and I push CA. Cool. And what happens next? Then again, you encounter another square bracket, right? So like I said, when you see a closing bracket, you start popping things. Till when do you pop? Till you encounter the opening bracket. Nidhi, what do you want me to repeat? Step 7. Okay. So over here, like I said, right, when you're popping things, it happens in the reverse order since it's a stack, right? Since it's a stack, when you're popping things, it happens in the reverse order. Since C and A came first, so A gets popped first and then you get C, right? So what you would want to do is you would want to reverse the string, correct? Which is essentially how it was in the original string, CA. So if the pop string was AC, you would reverse it and make it CA, right? And we go to the step 7. So in the step 7, you remember we popped the integer 2, right? So if you see the encoding rule said, if you have a number followed by a string inside a pair of square brackets, the decoded string is going to be this string repeated k times, right? So over here, it essentially means CA is going to be repeated twice because k is equal to 2 in this case. Yeah, is that clear now? Right? And so after you get that expanded string, yeah, you wouldn't have to reverse it. Like it is just to understand that, you know, okay, this is what's going to happen, kind of a thing. Okay, cool. Sure. I'll stop after this explanation. Cool. And yeah, so essentially you would want to, again, after you do this, you would push this string here, right? This CA twice, and you would want to push them. And once you're done pushing, you encounter another closing brackets, and then you would again start popping things, right? And until you find this opening bracket. And when you find an opening bracket, you would also start popping the integer stack, which is 3. And hence the expression becomes this. There are some simpler examples, and I think we are running short on time. So I'll add some detailed explanation in the code, and I'll just share that code with everyone. Right? I can, and you feel free to reach out to me in case of anything. Jasmine, I think we can close here. I will write up a detailed explanation of the code and probably attach a few more slides if people need that. And I'll also push this code to GitHub. Is that fine?
Awesome. Yeah. Sorry, guys, we are a bit over time. So, Shivangi, thank you so much for explaining and leading the session today. It was really very helpful. We'll attach this image plus all the code and the slides on our GitHub, and you all can find there. And yes, we can collaborate in Slack and keep learning together.
Yeah. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to send me a DM on Slack or just ask on the channel so that everyone can learn. Cool. So thank you, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shivangi, for doing such an amazing session. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.